And so I didn't grow up with like attorneys in my background, and I didn't go to private schools, and I didn't know that there's an entire industry of people that are paid and cater to wealthy families and help them prepare their applications to
Yeah.
go to, great undergrad institutions and to get into law schools and things. And so when I was Googling, I'm sitting there on active duty. I was like, man, I'm behind the eight ball on this. Like these other people have access to these resources. And but one thing that I had that they didn't maybe was no shame.
All right, welcome back. We are now on another episode with Beyond the Uniforms podcast. Today we have Matt Folks, who is an attorney with the local law firm here in Dallas-Fort Worth, big major metroplex. And Matt, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. I've worked with many attorneys in the past. I know you guys are pretty busy, but I really appreciate you taking the time out of the day to answer a few questions, talk a little bit about what you guys do, a little bit about your service and how you got into it. So, Matt, thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate you.
Well, hey, Mike, thanks for the invite and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Just to, kick things off, let's go ahead and start with what we typically go into, which is obviously one of the most important things is your service to the country. I've been trying to get better at this and thanking all of my military veterans, my fellow military veterans for serving the country, doing things that they do. So we appreciate you, man. I thank you so much for that, your time in the service. Let's start with what you did. You were in the Air Force. What'd you do in the Air Force, man?
Yeah, I was in Air Force Space Command, and when I went to college, I was heading out to school, and my brother, who was enlisted in the Air Force at the time, he knew that I didn't have any way to pay for school, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you do ROTC? They'll pay for it." And I said,
Yeah.
That sounds like something I need." So when I went out to college, I showed up at the ROTC building and said, "I hear this is the place where you go in the Air Force, and they you can get a scholarship." And so I started taking classes. I applied. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship there. Um, my parents were both in the Air Force, so it's kind of in our blood, I
Oh,
guess.
nice.
And so I did the ROTC thing, went to field training, got back, and it was in some ways I think it's kind of a typical military story. That I think it was the last week of my junior year, and we'd always been wondering when you're going to fill out your dream sheet.
Mm.
But the folks that worked in the office, they're like, "We'll let you know when it's time." Well,
Yeah.
apparently they didn't let us know. There was an inspection that year, and they were really, I mean, you know how inspections are. And so they were caught up with all that stuff. And so they brought us in, and they said, I'll never forget it. Sorry, Tech Sergeant Davenport, he said, it was unfortunate, it was inevitable. Your paperwork didn't get put in for the
Yeah.
career fields. Um, you, you,
Yeah.
you,
How ironic, right?
you always use passive voice when you don't want it to be
Yeah.
you, right? But he's like, yeah, but the bad news is the Air Force already picked your job and your career field. But the
Mm.
good news is you can still put in for a location. So maybe you're not doing the job thought you wanted to do, but you could put in for California or Texas or somewhere warm. Um, but you know what? I think it's like that Garth Brooks song, I thank God for unanswered prayers. I
Yeah.
had the jobs that I thought that I wanted to do when I was, 21 years old. I ended up being assigned to Space Command, which I knew nothing about space when I started, but by the time I got into it and I did my job, I loved it. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved the experiences that I had. I was stationed in California, incredible opportunities. And I don't know that that ever would have happened had I filled out that form with the things that my 21-year-old self thought that I wanted to do. But no, so
Yeah.
I was set up to go to Space Command, and I was stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, which is about 3 hours north of LA. It's in the Central Coast, beautiful area, and I got to launch rockets with Boeing and Lockheed and SpaceX and Orbital Sciences, and just an incredible opportunity during a great period of my life.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Obviously, I won't go into a whole lot because of the sake of time. But I mean, and I think you hit it pretty well in the head. Is the Air Force and probably any military branch, right? They offer so many different opportunities, and I knew what I wanted to do when I went to the Air Force. I wanted to be a cop, so I went in security forces, and so I got that. I went in there. I was like, I went to the recruiter, and recruiters are great, obviously, right? They sell the job, and I was like, I want to travel. I want to see the world. He's like, oh yeah, you're going to travel, all right? But and so I ended up getting security forces, and I was actually I was stationed at Beale, which is a few hours north of Vandenberg.
Oh, right. I've been there.
California.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's kind of one of those things that we call in the Air Force is like, once you're there, it's like the black hole, and the only way to get out is to go to Korea. And so I knew people there that spent their entire 20 to 22 year careers at Beale because they could never get out.
Wow.
It's nuts. So I did my time in active there, and then I went to reserves to Travis, which you're probably familiar with as well, right there in the
right. I've been to both of those.
Yeah, and very nice areas. I never actually got to make it down to Vandenberg. Anyway, I say all that because for anybody who's listening who's thinking about going to the military, just it's one of those things where I think if you have a mindset to go in and to be open a little bit, you may go in as one thing, but like you said, God answers your prayers in funny ways. There may be other opportunities, which I've spoken to quite a few of them while I was in, that the Air Force is like, well, this is what you wanted. However, it's mission critical. Obviously, everything's done by the mission and needs of the military, right? And they put you in something else. And you had a really great opportunity to go into something that I don't think a lot of people really consider, or at least had a great opportunity to experience. And that's one of the other things I want to do besides fly, of course, in the Air Force. Was space and all that cool stuff that you see out there that's really unknown. And so you had some really awesome, great experiences, I believe, that most people don't experience. So I really want to touch on that, just take a couple of minutes to do that. But you went into Space Command, you did some really cool and fun stuff, and you are nowhere near that industry now. So how did that transition? Like, how did you go from, so you were off or enlisted? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was an officer. I went through ROTC, and that was my commissioning source.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I was sent out to Vandenberg for training. At the time, space and missiles were one career field. So there was like an 80% chance I was going to be sent to work with the nuclear missiles in Minot, North Dakota, or in Wyoming.
Why not? Why not? Right?
Why not? Minot? Which is and I had lots of friends who went and did that, and I think there's great things about that career field, but it's not the thing that I wanted to do. And fortunately, I was able to. I went through my training at Vandenberg, and then that's also the place where we will launch our weather satellites and our spy satellites and do missile tests from the United States. And so there's a whole operational mission there in addition to the training center. And so I was fortunate enough to get a spot in operations there at Vandenberg. So I stayed at Vandenberg, and I worked launch operations. It was fun. I mean, if anybody's seen Apollo 13, where you've got kind of the mission control center where people are watching the little screens, that's what I did. So I had a screen that I was watching, and I essentially I supervised the contractors who were working at the radar and telemetry sites around the base, and they would report to me whether the sites were red or green. But I always knew that I was interested in law since I was at least in college. I was a communications major, knew nothing about space. I took this media law class that was taught by an adjunct professor who was a practicing attorney, and I did really well. I loved it. I loved the coming up with the arguments and thinking through, trying to figure out what your opponent was going to come up with. I did really well in the class, and he said, you've got a knack for this. This is something you could do. And while I was on active duty, that was something that I was working towards. So I took the law school admissions test right before I commissioned, and I was applying to law schools while I was on active duty. And it's funny, I was working on my MBA as well, because the Air Force is always trying to get you to, work on your next degree. And that added some time to my service commitment. And so when I was accepted to law schools the first time, I called the personnel center. And I don't know where I got this idea that you could just call them and be like, hey, I've got this commitment, but how about you just let me leave early? Or how about I just I'll just pay back the tuition assistance money. It's only, it's a couple $1,000. And the guy on the other end of the phone, he was like, yeah, that's not how this works at all. Um,
Yeah.
so, I will say again, like things work out. So I thought I wanted to go to law school about the time my original commitment was up, like the 4 to 5 year mark. But because I had this additional commitment, it pushed me out right to about 7 years. It was something like 7 years and 2 weeks. It was my total time in service. And looking back, I could have looked at it like, oh, I can't believe this. I had to do extra time. But A, I loved what I was doing anyway. And B, because I made it to that 7 year mark, I qualified for the full benefits of the post 9/11 GI Bill,
Mm.
which, I mean, anybody who's listening, I can't understate how much of a benefit it is when you
Yeah.
have access to those resources. It's like the world is your oyster. You can write your own ticket and go anywhere and do anything with the post 9/11 GI Bill. So I don't know, doing that full time in service actually worked out really great. I got to do a job that I enjoyed, and it set me up for the educational opportunities that I had after.
Yeah, there's a lot there with that post 9/11. I mean, when I used mine for my first degree, criminal justice, which, on a side note, if you're not going to pursue a higher degree in criminal justice, don't get the degree. It's a waste of time. Honestly, it really is, because if I went to law enforcement and they don't really care much about the degree. They just want to see that you have credit hours. And unfortunately, I wish I knew that before blowing my entire GI Bill on a 4-year degree. But the cool thing is that you got BAH, depending on your time, you get paid a housing allowance and all that stuff, but I'll save that for another discussion. But so you had an opportunity to do all that. You were really interested in legal work and becoming an attorney. So when you went through that process, were you actually done all that before you actually got out, or did you have to do a little bit of schooling afterwards before you separated?
So I had my undergrad done before I went on active duty. And
Gotcha.
then I finished up an MBA that I used tuition assistance for while I was
Okay.
in. Shout out to Oklahoma State.
Ah,
They've got a great distance learning program. And they also have very generous tuition for military members and for veterans. And so I was almost nothing out of pocket working for my MBA. So I only have great things to say about Oklahoma State. And
nice.
then while I was on active duty, that's when I was applying to law schools. And one thing that was really fortunate for me, I found out. So I grew up, my dad worked in a steel mill. My mom worked, in an office in a bank, just like a
Yeah.
local branch of a bank. And so I didn't grow up with like attorneys in my background, and I didn't go to private schools, and I didn't know that there's an entire industry of people that are paid and cater to wealthy families and help them prepare their applications to
Yeah.
go to, great undergrad institutions and to get into law schools and things. And so when I was Googling, I'm sitting there on active duty, I was like, man, I'm behind the eight ball on this. Like these other people have access to these resources, and but one thing that I had that they didn't maybe was no shame, and so I emailed a person who used to be the admissions dean at Chicago Law School and now has this admissions consultancy. And I emailed her. I was like, "Look, this is my situation. How much does it cost for this service?" Her name's Anna Ivy. She's an incredible person. And she emailed me back and she said, "You know what? My partner is a veteran and I handle, a handful of veteran cases every year on a pro bono basis. And also, I helped found this organization called Service to School, which
Mm.
is a nonprofit veteran service organization. And the whole purpose is to match active duty military members or veterans with other veterans who have been accepted into great programs and who will mentor them through the application process."
Hmm.
And so Anna Ivy helped coach me, and she reviewed my, for example, my admission statement and those sorts of things. And that was super helpful. She has an incredible book. But since then, since I was accepted to some of these top law schools, I have now served as a mentor since, geez, I want to say 2015 or
Oh,
2016,
nice.
maybe. And just one or two people per year. And it's so fulfilling to, see these people who are where I was and to review
Yeah.
their admission statement and help them tweak it. And so, by the time I was a third year at Harvard Law School, I had coached someone through the application process who was a first year student at Harvard Law School by that point because he was
Nice.
accepted. And that's a long answer to a short question, but
Yeah.
that was kind of the process for me. Service to school and as a veteran service organization was essential to me, and that's something I try to give back to now.
No, that's really great because one of the reasons why I do this podcast and newsletter is because there's so many resources out there for veterans that I don't think I mean, they can search the end of the internet, but things like that they don't come across. And this mentorship program that you got involved in which you are now a mentor, you know, can be passed on to other people that might be coming along in your footsteps or who might be, considering the same journey. And, I really want to try to provide those resources to whoever, is listening, and to give other value, obviously to my guests as well. Obviously you are in just the legal niche or industry, whatever you want to call it. Are there other, does that service provide, I guess, mentor opportunities to other industries, or was that specifically for legal and attorneys?
Oh, so service to school.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, no, you're good. So service to school, it's expanded over time. So there are mentors for veterans who are interested in applying to law school, but there's mentors for medical school, for top MBA
Gotcha. Okay.
programs. If you want to go to, Wharton to get your MBA,
Yeah.
and they also mentor lots of people to apply to top undergraduate programs. So
Gotcha.
people who enlisted out of high school and didn't have the opportunity to go to college right away, or maybe they wanted to serve first coming out, some of those people are working through service to school and they're getting accepted to Harvard and Yale, Stanford, and
Nice.
these Princeton, like top schools, because other veterans are you know reaching and they're helping bring them up to the next level. And so I can't say enough about the organization because there's lots of books out there about
Yeah.
tips and tricks to get into college or whatever it is,
Yep.
but there's nothing like having someone read your personal statement and telling you, for the love, don't say this. Like this is
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
it's really great to have a mentor real time walk through it with you and help you, even just help you get over the anxiety. I mean, you finally put in your application and then you get on these Reddit subreddits and you're like, man, they accepted
Yep.
25 people today. I wasn't one of the people, but having a
Yep.
mentor that's there to tell you, like, look, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. There's a lot of time
Right.
left. Just hang out, hang in there. You're going to be fine.
Yeah, no, and that's great advice because I mean, we all in a world in a day of instant gratification, we want things to happen immediately, and I think we forget that things do take time, and not everybody operates on that same principle of, things need to be done like yesterday. you know,
Right.
so no, that's a really great tip there. Now, as far as your firm, the leading attorney or the head attorney who owns it is JR. We talked before. He's a Marine. You work with his firm. What kind of services do you guys offer and provide? I mean, we talked about it before, but for anybody listening who's it's the Rodriguez firm, and we'll put some information, in the show notes and the description, all that stuff for anybody that wants to reach out. First, let's go over like what do you guys provide as far as services, and then like what are you bound by geographical locations, or where do you guys offer services at?
Right. So the Rodriguez firm, we are based out of Dallas. That's where our office is. But we perform, or we are in lawsuits and involved with litigation all over the country.
Okay.
So the Rodriguez firm, I will say this: we are a law firm of trial attorneys. So there are lots of law firms out there that serve different needs. they review contracts for businesses, or they will do um, trusts and estates, and they'll set things up, and they'll do family planning kind of things where they'll help a wealthy family set up their trust, or they'll handle divorces or family law cases. Those are typically not the kinds of cases that we handle. We are a litigation firm. And so the things that I would say, we do a lot of catastrophic injury cases and wrongful death suits and bet the company litigation. So if it's something that you think that there's a good chance it'll actually go to trial, we would be the law firm that you would want to call. And like you said, JR founded this firm decades ago, and he's tried dozens and dozens of cases actually in the courtroom in front of a jury. And one of our large clients is it's a national insurance company. And so we are the law firm that they call when there is a big case that doesn't look like it's going to settle. And so the last case that I worked on, I was working up outside of Seattle. And right now I'm working on a case that's down in El Paso. But I mean, we have cases from coast to coast if it fits that criteria.
Gotcha. So litigations, wrongful death, and things like that. A lot of people might have a few questions in there, and I might poke one or two at you if you got a minute. Like what constitutes at that? Like what are some things that people should look for? So let's say somebody went through something like that and they're just not sure, does this fit something that I can reach out to an attorney? Like what are some, like maybe one or two things that people can go, you know what, I think this is something I need to reach out to, Matt over at, the Rodriguez Law Firm.
I would say never hesitate to just ask, right? Because even if it's not a great fit for our law firm, just because it's not the type of case that typically we would handle, I can recognize that, and I can help steer you to somebody who would be a good fit for that type of case. Because you definitely want to have somebody who's going to treat your case with care. Yeah. And there are lots of law firms out there. I mean, you drive up and down the interstate, and there's billboards, right? And that billboard attorney might not be the best fit for your case. But I would say, especially business owners out there, if there is something where you think a potential lawsuit or a lawsuit is keeping you up at night, and you're thinking to yourself, this could end my business. You would want the Rodriguez firm on that case, because those are the kinds of cases we handle. Not just a smaller case where you're having a dispute with, your warehouse is adjacent to this other business and it's loud during this time of the day and that's kind of obnoxious. Or you're having a dispute with your neighbor over the fence line or something. And those might be cases where you want attorneys also. But those aren't the cases that typically we're hired to defend. Like usually when we're brought in, it's when your livelihood, your business is at risk, where that level of the level of risk is that high, where you think this is going to go to trial and this could crush us. This could cause us to file for bankruptcy. And we're the firm that you can rely on for that.
Gotcha. Is there a specific type of business that you guys work with, or is it kind of open to, I know it's kind of a shotgun statement here.
I think that's a great question, but because of the nature of the work that we do, it's been all sorts of businesses. I mean, the last case that I worked on, it was the franchisee of a national hotel chain, and there was a catastrophic injury. There was it was actually a shooting out of state, and the question was, who's at fault here? And there were multiple defendants, and it was a complicated case, and we were brought in for several of the defendants in that case. But I mean, we've worked on cases with, we've done a lot of product defect claim cases in automobile accidents and UTV accidents with major manufacturers of UTVs and ATVs. We've been brought in on, oil cases with, offshore stuff and pumps. And I mean, So it's not industry limited that we would be on.
Sure.
But like I said, if it's something where you think, wow, this could really impact my livelihood and my business, and the outcome of this case will determine whether this business continues to exist, those are the kinds of cases that typically we work on.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's really great to know, because there's a lot of businesses. Unfortunately, I read somewhere, not to get sidetracked here, but I did read recently, ironically, because I'm talking to an attorney, but that the United States is, I don't know if it's the leading country, but it is one of the top countries where we have the most attorneys in the country, because people love to sue.
Right.
But we do have that freedom, and that's why we are in this country, and that's why we have great folks like yourself. And that's why I wanted to bring you on and get a little bit of try to obviously provide listeners some any value. And if they're, and obviously a lot of veterans, they do own businesses or they're aspiring business owners, to really provide them a place and a trusted source that we can obviously direct some of our listeners to, and that's obviously to the J.R. Rodriguez law firm. And again, we'll put all that information in the show notes. I will close here in a second with something that I wanted to kind of give you guys a plug at, but I also wanted to give you an opportunity. So if anybody who is listening and needs some of your services or think that they might need your assistance, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So great way to reach out to me would just be shoot me an email. So you can get on our website. It's easy to find me. We're a smaller firm. We don't have hundreds of attorneys. And so the website is therodriguezfirm.com. And there are a lot of Rodriguezes out there who are practicing law, but our website is therodriguezfirm.com. And my email address is mfolks, M like Matt, folks as in how are your folks, at therodriguezfirm.com.
Yeah.
And
no worries.
and so if you just navigate to our website, you can find me, and I'm happy to touch base with anybody, have a phone call, or set up a kind of a Zoom like this.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time. I did want to kind of give you guys a small little quick plug and let you know, and anybody else who's listening, they're more than, I think, in my eyes, at least just a law firm of people who go and fight cases and do the battles that they've been trained to do, but also that they do give back to the community, and they have generously taken care of the sponsorship and everything else that have helped the parking passes for our school, for particularly my daughter's school, and obviously you guys are kind of involved in as well, but you guys have done that, given our entire school parking passes, set up that whole system to make sure that things get picked up smoothly. Our kids are, the teachers come out effortlessly every single day, drop off our kids, and that whole process goes smoothly. So not only do you guys handle businesses and cases and trials and things like that, but you guys are also involved in the community as well. And so, we greatly appreciate that, what you guys are doing out there. So I wanted to give you guys that, because I want anybody to listen to, who's listening to this, to know that you guys are doing a lot more bigger and better things, not just as far as business wise, but also in the community. So we appreciate that. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. All right, everybody. That's it for this one. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one.